Black men tried to warn us.
Fathers have left home in order for their children to get meat and bread. There are so many dehumanizing elements in the welfare system that we are concerned about removing. Ultimately, we are concerned about a guaranteed annual income. And the other thing I think it is very necessary to say is that everybody's on welfare in this country.
Black men tried to warn us. Guys, when you look at the effects that public assistance has had on the Black community, and now what this expansion is having, the effects this expansion of public assistance is having on America in modern day society, Black men absolutely tried to warn us of what was coming. Since they were the first group of men to be put out of their homes, in relation to women getting a guaranteed income as long as there wasn't a man in the home. Watch the end of the video to really understand how Black men tried to warn us, and now the implications that public assistance is having not only on the Black community, but on America as a whole, and expanding across the world. Now let's just go ahead and jump right back into the video.
And when it comes to Black people and poor people, we just call it something else. When it's for white people and rich, we call it subsidies.
It's no secret, fatherless households are more common in the Black community. A survey from the American Consensus Institution revealed that 67% of Black children under 18 in the US live in homes without fathers. This is a stark contrast to white children, as only 24% of them live in fatherless homes. But it wasn't always like that. The Black families survived generations of open racism, widespread poverty, and slavery. They lived through segregation and violence, and strong family bonds used to be the norm.
As of 1960, 2/3 of all Black American children were living with both parents. That declined over the years until only 1/3 were living with both parents in 1995. So it's not the legacy of slavery that destroys the African American family.
It's the legacy of the welfare state.
Between 1890 and 1950, the marriage rate was much higher among Black women than white women. A fraction of Black children lived in homes without their fathers. But everything changed with the expansion of the welfare state. It divided the household and created a dependency on welfare.
Now, do you know the reason why marriage rates were higher among Black women than white women? Because Black women needed men more than white women did. Think about it. White women were more likely to come from families that had money. As a result, there were more white women that could go off and do different things, or could avoid marriage entirely. However, Black women did not have this. There was none of this intergenerational wealth. And as a result, every Black woman needed a Black man to provide for her and subsidize her living expenses, as well as the living expenses of her children. Hence, she could not survive without that man. And what the welfare state did was it stepped in and it removed the man from the household, took authority, control, and ownership of the children, and the authority over the Black woman was then transferred to the state, who then told her that it would subsidize her living as long as that man was no longer present.
It reminds me of what President Reagan said.
I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
So, what happened? What's the mechanism? Here is a detailed look at how the welfare state played a role in the dissolving of the family structure over the years. People say that the breakdown of traditional family units, family structures, is a byproduct of Black poverty, not just because there is no man to support the family financially, but also because women tend to earn less than men on average. Of course, the connection between the two is there, but it goes deeper than that. Welfare was a mean little business. It was designed to get people by in a pinch. Public assistance programs, like welfare entitlements, have been a part of American culture since the 1940s. Unfortunately, like in many other aspects of government institutions, Black Americans were left out. In time, Black people could also get financial support, but it wasn't easy. Mothers who applied for checks had to let social workers inspect their homes to see if their conditions were suitable for welfare. These workers also had to make sure no man was living in the house. But even if they qualified for support, the amount they received was meager and not enough to build a stable life. In the early 1960s, welfare was not yet common. Even in the most impoverished black communities, in the decade that followed, the number of black people on welfare went up by 169%. They further increased by 30% from 1970 to 1975. In 1972, New York City, almost 1 out of every 6 residents was on welfare. A major portion of these households were black. Although black people were only around a tenth of all Americans, they made up almost 50% of all welfare recipients by the late 70s. A recent UNICEF report showed that many children under 18 in America struggle financially, and African American children are nearly 4 times more likely to be in poverty than white children.
Now, what makes this even more interesting is for blacks at that time to only make up 10% of the population, but make up 50% of the welfare recipients. What that tells us, and keep in mind, the vast majority of those people are going to be are women and their children. Almost 99.9% of them are women with their children. Then you quickly realize the devastating impact that public assistance had on the black community. It put the black man out of the community, and it destroyed the family unit. And by destroying the family unit, it destroyed the community. If you look at the kinds of men that women tend to go for in the black community, they're thugs. All right, they basically they put the men out. They put the good, hardworking men out, and then they go for the Tyrones and the Pookies and the Ray Rays and Little Poncho. They love Little Poncho and his brother Sancho. Okay, and these men, they don't bring anything of value. They take. Of course, these are the men that women love. So these are the men that the young men model themselves after in the black community. They're the superstars. All right. If women were going out there in the black community, going and getting doctors and lawyers and men of high value, then of course their children would emulate these men as well. They would say, okay, well, I want to go and become a doctor or a lawyer or an astronaut. All right. These young men would be overrepresented in these fields. But because the kinds of men that their mothers love are these really awful men, these are the types of men that these young men end up aspiring to become, because they're also the kinds of men they're going to be surrounded by, because these are the kinds of men that their mothers surround themselves with. It's a terrible cycle. It's a horrible cycle.
Of families receiving cash assistance has decreased since 1996. Child poverty rates for black children in the US remain high. This outcome is not by accident. I studied the evolution of social welfare policies in the US from the New Deal to the 1996 reforms, and found that these policies have been discriminatory from the start. And a lot of people can confess to that. This led many black families to fall into cultural and economic ruin. In a short period, healthy black people started relying on government assistance to achieve some level of normalcy. But within the city slums, that normalcy was impossible to get. Black children barely knew their fathers, and most were raised by unemployed and unmarried mothers.
Now, guys, look at what's happened. When you look at so many young white children today, so many of them no longer know their fathers. When you look at a lot of the young women who are in these videos online, just being very, very bad, doing terrible things, even like the Hawk Tui girl, how much you want to bet that her father is not in her life? I'm just being so serious. It's sad. You'll ask these girls, what would your father say? They'll go, I don't know him. Black men tried to warn us. They tried to warn us from the get-go that this type of thing was happening and that it was coming for our communities. It was coming for other communities. The black community was just a test run. They ran it in the black community, they put it in there, and they saw how well it worked there, and they're like, okay, this is a success. Now we need to implement it in all communities, as many as we possibly can. Because the goal is division and control. It's just like when people say that socialism is kindness or communism is kindness. These things are not kindness. They are control. Socialism leads to communism. Communism leads to Marxism. Marxism leads to totalitarianism, and they wrap it in a bow and tell you that it's good for you. If it's good for me, it's good for you. It's good for everyone, and you better keep your mouth shut and know what's good for you if you want everything to be okay. It's a sick, sad result. Very sick reality. And black men tried to warn us that this was happening to them and it was going to happen to us, and we didn't want to listen. We did not want to listen. Honestly, I knew very little about the African American community. I knew very, very little about it growing up. I did not really understand them. I'll be honest. And I used to have a lot of, I don't want to use certain words, but I just did not understand the black community. I thought that all African Americans were a part of like the thug, the gangster culture, and that they all were into like certain kinds of music. I had no idea what these men were going through. I didn't know that the men that we were seeing were the men that were left, you know, the Tyrones, the Pookies, the Ray Rays, because the decent men were all put out of their homes. They were all sent away. So what you're left with are a bunch of criminals that are in and out of jail, and they're basically they're the representatives that of the community. We don't, because all the other good men are gone. The doctors are gone, the lawyers are gone. The men who have the tradesmen are gone. These men are gone. They put these men out. They didn't want these men. And that's why a lot of these men ended up going to other communities. That's why a lot of these men ended up going and getting white women or Asian women or Hispanic women, because black women did not want these men. They didn't want to struggle at all, or they thought that these men were boring and corny, and they would rather pick up a thug and live on public assistance than be with a good man and ever have ups and downs. Black men tried to warn us, but we didn't want to listen. And the future is going to be a lot of destitution, poverty, homelessness, and hardship, because more for modern women, because more and more women are finding that the government is not able to meet all of their needs. The government is not able to subsidize their living. The government can't even pay its bills. $35 trillion in debt, and it can't pay the interest on that. We're heading into a massive decline. I told you, we have guys who are living in their vans right now. They are happily living in shoeboxes at the side of the road, just like I called it, and they're thriving. They're absolutely thriving, stacking cash. All right, dudes renting rooms, basically living far below their means, and they're stacking money. And modern women will never see any of that. For many of them, the future their future will include a lot of destitution, because the government cannot subsidize their living. They cannot provide for themselves, indefinitely. They're not going to be able to work for the rest of their lives. In many countries, women are allowed to retire and begin collecting benefits, Social Security or the equivalent, before the age in their 50s, while men have to wait until like 65, because women cannot work the same number of years as men. Guys, guys, a lot of women in Western society, especially Gen X women, who thought that they were going to basically do whatever they wanted to do, and now they're going to find themselves living in poverty. And black men warned us, and they tried to warn these women as well, like, you don't want to go down this road. But they said they were strong and empowered, and now look at what's happening. By the way, guys, if you're enjoying the content, subscribe to our newsletter for my personal thoughts, insights, and a free copy of my ebook, The Blueprint for Escaping the Rat Race. Click the link in the description to get your free copy. Guys, what do you think regarding all of this? Black men tried to warn us. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll talk about it in the comments. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWM and walking away. And cheers.